Hello and welcome to another video. Guys, you know what's been bugging me and annoying me all of my life? Do you know what that is? It's the politicians. The politicians, I've been trying to get into watching them, seeing what they've got to say, and it always annoyed me so much. Every party, honestly, every party annoyed me because what happens is someone turns up, whether it's Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, Liz, whoever it was, Boris, all those people, whatever party they're from, for them to get elected, they go and they start talking about all the stuff they're going to spend. They come in and they say, guys, when I'm in charge of this country, me and my party, we're going to build more schools, we're going to build more roads, we're going to invest more in the NHS, we're going to spend more money on everything, we're going to really support and spend, we're going to spend all this money and the country is going to be great. To me, that's great, but I was always thinking, where the hell are you going to get all this money from? I always wanted somebody to come in and just say, look guys, this is where the UK is. This is where the money comes from at the moment. This is the borrowing. This is what we're spending. What I'm going to change is I'm going to get more money this way. I'm going to reduce those taxes. I'm going to increase this one. That will give me a bit more money. I'm going to borrow less, but because I'm going to have more money here, I'm going to invest it into the NHS. I'm going to invest that into the building more schools. I'm going to make transport free, whatever it might be. They would then have my respect because I would know they understand what they're talking about and they would have my vote. But that never happens. All they do is they come in, I'm going to spend on this, I'm going to spend on that, I'm going to spend on that. They probably don't know themselves how the money work. So I've made a spreadsheet that shows exactly where the government, UK government, gets their money from, the best approximations and research that I could do at least. So where they get their money from, and then where do they spend their money. So the spreadsheet shows both sides of it. I'm going to talk you through it, and I'm kind of exploring as well because I spent the whole day researching this. So I hope you enjoy. Alright guys, let's get into this. So firstly, where does the government get its money from? Well, a lot of us know we all pay tax, and that is the main source of government income. I knew that, but then also I thought, is that 80% of the income? Is it 100% of the income? Or is it 52.5% of the income? Honestly, I didn't know. So I've researched this, and the first answer is around 90% of the income of the UK government comes from taxes. So that's a helpful thing for me to find out at least. So then what I've done is I've broken down what tax contribute the most. Because for me, companies pay a lot of tax, so I would have thought, you have major companies in the UK, they potentially pay millions or billions in tax, so they would make up the majority of the tax going to the government. But then there's also income tax, national insurance tax, all those other taxes, even alcohol tax, stamp duty, road tax, there's all those taxes. So how much does each one really contribute to the UK economy and to the government? So this is your answer right here. The biggest contributor of all the taxes is the income tax. So for that one, everyone who has a job, who works, pays income tax. First 12 grand-ish is tax-free. Hopefully they move that to a higher number soon because that's been frozen for a while. But then above that, it's a progressive tax system. I've talked about it in other videos, the difference between Scotland and England. But the reality is you're going around above 12 grand. You go up to 20%, then 40%, and 45% and above. So the more you earn, the more you pay. So that one actually gives around 26% of the UK government sort of revenue every year. Another fact that I found out quite recently is that this amount is quite high, obviously. You're talking £282 billion a year. And actually 60% of that comes from people that work and get more than £120,000 a year as a salary. So it really hits heavy on the high earners. So above 120k, they pay more than 60% of that. And then the ones that earn below 120k only pay 40% of that. So in terms of the number of people, you have a smaller number of high earners that pay a higher majority of that tax. So that one is really on the sort of, it's not really taxing the rich, it's more taxing the rich employed people. Because remember, a lot of the people who are rich, they have their own companies and they will do tax efficient ways of taking money for themselves. They're not going to just take a salary and pay tons of income tax. So this really hits people who have a salaried income that is large. So most normal people basically. So that's the biggest source of income. Then you have the national insurance contributions. I was surprised by that personally because I thought national insurance contribution is progressive. Again, I've talked about it in another video, but they kind of cap how, they don't cap, but they almost make it more steady. So as your income grows and grows and grows, the income tax just exponentially rises pretty much, whereas the national insurance contributions, they kind of level off. They keep increasing slowly, but they kind of level off. But regardless of that, there is a lot of those. And also remember that all the employers also pay national insurance contributions, so as a company. So that makes up for almost 17% of the tax revenue that the government gets. Next, we have value added tax. So whenever you go to the shop, there are some VAT exempt products, but majority of stuff has VAT added to it. So whenever you buy a rug for your bedroom for 100 quid, 20 quid from that is value added tax. Whenever you buy some products, just the ones that you eat, you know, like some sort of ketchup, it might be exempt. I'm making up stuff, but most of the stuff is not exempt. You buy ketchup for £1, 20p goes to that. So whatever product you buy a car for 100 grand, 20 grand of that goes to the government. So whenever you buy something, VAT gets charged, goes to the government. So to be honest, that one makes sense. There's a lot of purchases being made and VAT is being charged. So that one is a big contributor at 15%. Again, surprising because I thought that would be more, but it is what it is. Next, we've got other indirect taxes. So what does that actually include? So that includes things like your road tax and then tax on your fuel. That brings quite a lot of money in currently. Tax on the alcohol, tobacco, sugar, and a bunch of other taxes that government has implemented. So on specific products, you have those special extra taxes, and that brings in 93.4 billion. So a lot of money. So in there's maybe a bit of a conflict because the government is saying that we're taxing tobacco because it's bad, so we're trying to disencourage it. But actually, the sale of tobacco contributes a lot to the money that the government gets. So actually, I wouldn't say it's good for them to keep selling tobacco, but it's not a bad thing that the tobacco keeps selling because now they're getting more and more taxes from that. So it's just something to think about. Next, we have capital taxes. Well, actually, that's not the next one. The next one is 9.3%, and that one is even higher than the indirect taxes, and that's the company taxes. So that will be predominantly the corporation tax that the companies pay. There's other things that the companies pay, but predominantly is that, and that one accounts for 9.3% or 100 billion per year. A lot of money, good contribution, but I'm a bit shocked personally. I would have thought that the company taxes would be up there with income tax, national insurance, because you have huge companies making billions. There's not many of them, but there are some. They will be paying a huge amount of tax. So the fact that normal working people paying their share of taxes can be 3 times as much is, something quite unusual. I personally think because a lot of companies are a bit dodgy and they do stuff that, maybe avoids tax a little bit, which is why this one is a bit low. But again, interesting to know. I didn't know before. Some of the other ones, council tax and business rates, 6.9%. Non-tax receipts, so obviously most of the income is from tax, but then there's other things that I've noted down here. So things like the gross operating surplus from public corporations, NHS dental service, when you pay for some of the NHS dental stuff, the rent from your council, housing, social housing, and then you've got dividends and interest on some of the investments from the government. So that's the ones where the government has invested some of its money and then they're getting interest on that. There's another interest, which is an expense, which is huge. but this is a bit different. So all in, UK government gets 90% of its revenue as taxes and 10% as non-tax receipts. It can also be things like fines. You know, if people do something not right with a company or whatever else, they might get hit with a big fine. Corporations might also get hit with a big fine. Again, that could contribute to the non-tax receipts. So this yellow box hopefully explains to you how the government gets its money. It is around one or just over £1 trillion per year. So just to give you a scale, that's where UK is pretty much operating at. They're looking at around they're bringing in around £1 trillion per year. Next question is, okay, they've collected all those taxes and non-taxes as well. Where do they spend it? How does that work? So let's have a look at that next. Well, in here is a rough estimate of how the government in the UK spends its taxes. It's not perfect. There's a lot of improvements that can be made potentially, but this is roughly the summary. Number one place is kind of shared. I've seen various sources, but you have very similar amount on NHS and healthcare as well as welfare. So welfare is all the benefits that are being paid out. So your disability benefits, your universal credit benefits, there's so many different benefits here. All the different benefits amount to potentially the first or the second biggest item on the expenditure list, 200 odd billion a year. That's where a lot of the conflict comes, with illegal immigrants, people on benefits. That's where a lot of the bad emotions come from, because there's a huge amount going out to support that, which is controversial, I would say. Next, we've got health. That one is just a slightly smaller amount, but I'm pretty sure year to year that can vary. But that's mostly the NHS. I mean, it's understandable, right? Welfare is understandable. Imagine millions of people claiming some sort of benefit. I mean, that will have a huge amount coming out from the system. I've got some statistics here. Let me just see if I can load it up. I can just do edit note. So apparently 24 out of 70 million people, so 70 million people roughly is the population of the UK, 24 out of that 70 million have claimed some sort of benefit. So that means that 35% of the people in the UK have claimed some sort of benefit. You have to be careful with that statement, because actually some of those 24, actually a big proportion, maybe 12 million, so about half, are claiming state pension, which is a separate note altogether. So in reality, there's maybe 12 million people claiming benefits, which is potentially 18% of the population. So it's still quite a lot, of people. And that's why the welfare is so huge. NHS, imagine all the doctors that have to be there, all the hospitals, all the latest equipment, and then all the drugs, all the prescriptions. NHS has access to some fantastic medicines, and they can potentially prescribe it to a person. If the person is 50 years old, he or she might get some medicine, and then they will have to keep giving that medicine for the rest of their life. Imagine they live to 90. That's 50 years of potentially one packet a week, expensive medication. That's one person. In the US, other countries, that person might be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to be able to afford that. In the UK, it's free. It's not great because it's overconstrained. There's far too many people that are trying to use it. There's a lot of issues with it, but there's a lot of good things as well. So it's, again, a very controversial system. Probably needs some improvements, but it's also understandable why it's one of the biggest spending items on here, just because of the scale of it countrywide. Next is state pension. As I said, there is 12 to 13 million people in the UK of the pensioners' age, and they claim state pension. So they claim some of that 10%, but then potentially they also tap into that welfare, because a lot of them don't only get state pension, they get like low income additions, disability payments, winter fuel payments, whatever they might be. So the older people take up a lot of the funding, but you need to look at it in a sort of pragmatic way, because those older people have probably worked all their lives and have paid taxes all their lives. So if that's the case, they would have contributed so much money over that time that it makes sense for the government to support them by now. Again, controversial topic. There isn't a very one specific right or wrong, but that gives you the next one. Next, we've got national debt interest. So we borrow every year as a country, and then we have to pay debt interest on that every year. And that one is around 10%, about 121 billion per year. Then you've got education, so all of your schools, your funding for the universities, PhDs, all the sort of government subsidies into the education space, 9.1%. Defense at around 5%. So that one is obviously, all of them are very controversial now that I think about it. Defense is obviously making sure we are secure as a country, so that could be research and looking at weapons and all that sort of stuff. Public order and safety, I believe that's things like police and fire service and stuff like that, 3.9%. We've got transport at 3.8%. I wasn't sure what that was, but now when I think about it, they give older people free passes, and I think what happens is every time they scan that free pass, the company just puts it into their database, and then they come to the government in the end of the year and say, look, there's been 5 million journeys on our buses, there's the proof, and each journey should have been £3, therefore you give us that much money. So then they need to reimburse for that. So I think is that now they also give free things for younger people, so they're kind of subsidizing that a bit there. Business and industry, government administration around 2%. I'm not sure, I think it might be higher, but that's just one number that's out there. Housing, utilities, environment, and some of the smaller ones there. And then you have other, which is government running cost, which might be similar to government administration. Overseas representation, so I think things like UK embassies are all over the place, and the government has to pay for all their salaries, all their rents, all their security detail, all their whatever business they're doing, flying people in and out, rescuing people, whatever it is, they need to pay for all that. And then you've got obviously incentive subsidies that the government does for electric cars, for wind, for all of that stuff. Depending on how you do the calculation, this can vary quite a lot, between 10 and 20%. Not everything can be categorized, and it's very difficult to get a full breakdown of exactly what's being spent, because as you can imagine, they're spending over £1 trillion. First, it's very hard to keep track of absolutely everything, and second, they're probably not great at doing it either. So there's a bit of it's not as clear as I'd like it to be, but that gives an overall picture of how the money gets spent. So with this example here, the government gets 1.08 trillion in from taxes, and then they spend 1.223 trillion. So what that means is that you need to take the 1.223 trillion, take away what they get in, and you're left with 142 billion, and that's what they borrow. So when they talk about deficit, black hole, whatever it might be, it's essentially looking at the forecast of how much they're going to bring in a year and how much they're going to spend in a year. And the difference, ideally, if you're going to bring in 1.5 billion and spend 1.2 billion, you've got the extra money, it's great, but then you're going to have a lot of pressure to decrease all your taxes. So you want to be in a place where you are bringing in 1.2 billion and spending 1.2 billion. Obviously, again, very controversial, because all of us want this 1.2 billion spent to be efficient and good. But within government, there's always contracts that are being issued out that are far too expensive and all this crap that goes on. So it's not great, but whenever you bring in less than what you're spending, that extra money the government borrows, then that gets added to the national debt. If it gets far too much, this will just keep increasing from 9% from 10% to 12% to potentially becoming the highest expense. And we don't want that. So the government has to be careful on managing how much debt they are taking on, and that they can actually service the debt payments going forward. So there you have it. It's a difficult topic, very controversial from a lot of angles, very emotional for people. But hopefully now I've done what a lot of the stupid politicians have never done, which is explain to you, where does the government money come from? How does that work? You can analyze this for yourself and make your own judgments on whether you think it's fair, not fair, or if government should do it differently. And then how does the government money get spent? Again, some people will say this is good, this is a reasonable amount. Some people will say defense is far too much, get rid of all the benefits, get rid of NHS. Some people say invest more in the NHS and actually that would be better. There's all the various opinions. It's very hard to say this is exactly the right way forward, but hopefully that gave you an unbiased way of looking at how things work. I'm more than happy to share this spreadsheet. Just let me know in the comments if you want me to share it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.